We have a tremendous threat militarily because of the power of weapons and weaponry. It's a tremendous threat. Nobody talks about it, but it's a tremendous threat.
The blast of dangerous wintry weather and Arctic temperatures hitting much of the country this weekend, with more than 6 million Americans under winter weather alerts.
Tonight, Syria's neighbors, Lebanon, Jordan, and Iran, are on high alert.
Is that Jesus Christ? Please.
The earth shakes, storms rage, and wars spread across the globe. Natural disasters devastate entire cities, and political tensions rise to dangerous levels. The world seems to be on the brink of chaos. Everywhere you look, the signs of the end times are becoming harder to ignore. For centuries, the Bible has warned of a time when the world would face unimaginable trials, when wars, famine, disease, and death would sweep across the earth. The four horsemen of the apocalypse, symbols of these calamities, ride ever closer, bringing devastation in their wake. And now, as we see political unrest, environmental disasters, and growing global conflict, the question arises: could we be living in the last days the Bible prophesied? As we explore these terrifying Bible prophecies, we'll examine how the world's current events may be eerily mirroring what the Bible predicted for the near future. Could 2025 be the year these prophecies begin to unfold? Stay with us to find out. The coming of the Antichrist, Revelation 13. From the ashes of chaos, a leader arises, one who promises peace, but whose heart is consumed with evil. He is a figure of incredible power and deception, commanding the loyalty of nations and individuals alike. A man who, by his very nature, embodies the corruption and rebellion against God that Scripture warned would one day come. In Revelation 13, we are introduced to a ruler who will rise to power with the charisma and authority to sway the world. The Antichrist is described as a figure who, under the guise of unity and peace, will deceive humanity into following him, leading them away from the truth. His reign will be marked by blasphemy, deception, and an iron-fisted control over the nations. Though the Antichrist is often thought of as a figure from a distant future, many believe we are already witnessing the early signs of his rise. In today's world, we see political movements pushing for global unity, transcending national boundaries and eroding sovereignty. World leaders call for international cooperation, a new world order, and solutions that require the sacrifice of individual freedoms. These developments are setting the stage for a powerful figure who will claim to have the answers to humanity's deepest crises. The world has seen the rise of political figures who command immense influence, some of whom speak of global peace and unity, yet their actions and policies create division and strife. Could the Antichrist be a leader who promises prosperity while secretly steering the world toward destruction? The Bible's warning seems clearer with each passing year. The mark of 666 and the global control system, Revelation 13:16-18.
This is where I get scared, because it's too similar to the mark of the beast. It's too similar to exactly what it says. You won't be able to trade, you won't be able to do anything unless you have the mark, unless you bear the mark.
Imagine a world where every financial transaction, every movement, every decision you make is monitored and controlled. A time when the simple act of buying food, traveling, or even going to work requires you to be marked. A mark that signifies your total submission to a global system of control. Revelation 13:16-18 speaks of a system where no one can buy or sell unless they receive a mark on their right hand or forehead. a mark bearing the number of the beast, 666. This mark will be the sign of total allegiance to the Antichrist, marking the individual as part of his world order. As we look around today, technology is evolving at a rapid pace, and many of the conditions for this prophecy to be fulfilled are already in place. Digital currencies are becoming more common, and some nations are pushing to eliminate cash altogether. Biometric technologies, such as facial recognition and fingerprint scanning, are now commonplace. The development of implantable microchips, designed to store personal and financial data, has already begun. These chips, while presented as conveniences, hold the potential for total surveillance and control. We are entering a world where privacy is becoming a thing of the past. Governments and corporations are increasingly using technology to monitor and control the behaviors of individuals. Social credit systems are being implemented in some countries, and the push for universal digital IDs could soon become a reality in others. The infrastructure for a global control system is being quietly set up, and in such a system, the mark of revelation could be a literal reality. A digital identifier that will determine who can participate in the economy and who cannot. The Bible's prophecy of 666 is not just a religious warning. It's a statement about the kind of world humanity is on track to create. A world where a single entity has the power to decide who can access resources and who cannot, and where loyalty to that entity becomes a matter of survival. Armageddon, Revelation 16:16. The time for peace is over. Nations gather in the Middle East, and the armies of the world converge on Israel. The land of God's covenant becomes the battlefield for the final confrontation between good and evil. In the valley of Megiddo, the forces of light and darkness will clash in an apocalyptic showdown. In Revelation 16:16, we read of a gathering of nations at Armageddon, the final battle that will determine the fate of humanity. This place, known as the Valley of Megiddo, has been the site of many ancient battles, but in the Bible, it symbolizes the last cataclysmic confrontation. Scripture tells us that the kings of the earth will gather there, led by the Antichrist, to wage war against the armies of heaven and the faithful. The significance of this prophecy is impossible to ignore, especially in light of the political and military tensions surrounding Israel. The Middle East has always been a hotbed of conflict, but in recent years, the situation has escalated. The rivalry between nations and the religious disputes over Jerusalem are intensifying. The Bible has long foretold that Israel would be at the center of the world's final conflict, and today, we see this prophecy taking shape before our eyes. Nations that once stood in opposition to Israel are now aligning with it, while others are openly hostile. The global superpowers continue to posture over the fate of the Holy Land. The alliances and rivalries that will play a key role in the fulfillment of Armageddon are already being formed. The Bible tells us that this final battle will not only involve military forces, but also a spiritual battle of cosmic proportions, a battle where good and evil will collide in a way that has never been seen. As we look at the news, it's clear that tensions over Israel are not cooling. They're intensifying. The potential for conflict in the region is at an all-time high, and with it, the possibility that the events of Armageddon are rapidly drawing closer. The destruction of Damascus, Isaiah 17. The night is still, but in the distance, the sound of bombs and gunfire grows louder. A city that has stood for millennia, the heart of ancient Syria, now trembles under the weight of unrelenting conflict. Damascus, once a thriving metropolis, is reduced to rubble. The prophecy of Isaiah, spoken thousands of years ago, seems to be unfolding in real time. Isaiah 17 gives us a chilling prophecy. Damascus will no longer be a city. but will become a heap of ruins. The ancient capital of Syria, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, is destined to be utterly destroyed, according to the Bible. The prophecy does not leave room for ambiguity. It is a total destruction, so complete that the city will cease to exist as a city. For decades, Damascus has been caught in the turmoil of regional conflict. But in recent years, especially with the Syrian civil war, we have seen this prophecy inch closer to fulfillment. The city has suffered immense damage as airstrikes, artillery, and ground assaults have shattered its infrastructure. The devastation is not just military, it is symbolic. Damascus has long stood as a symbol of ancient power and wisdom in the region, but the prophecy tells us that its fall will mark the end of its significance in world history. As the war rages on, the possibility of a total collapse of Damascus grows more likely. Could this be the moment when Isaiah's words come to life? As nations continue to battle for control in Syria, it's becoming clear that the path toward this final destruction is being laid before us. The four horsemen of the apocalypse, Revelation 6:1-8. Out of the darkness, four riders appear, each one carrying a power that will bring devastation to the earth. In Revelation 6, the four horsemen of the apocalypse are released, each one representing a different aspect of the coming destruction. These riders, conquest, war, famine, and death, are more than just vivid symbols. They encapsulate the forces that will bring the world to its knees. War, red horse. We are living in an age where global tensions are at a boiling point. Conflicts in the Middle East, the rise of new superpowers, and the threat of nuclear escalation have created an atmosphere of constant instability. The prophecy of the Red Horseman, who comes to sow destruction through war, resonates deeply with the current geopolitical landscape. With modern technology and the sheer scale of military power, a global war could erupt with frightening speed, drawing nations into conflict in ways we've never seen before. Pestilence, Black Horse. The world recently faced one of the most devastating pandemics in modern history, COVID-19. It wreaked havoc across nations, strained healthcare systems, and caused widespread fear and suffering. But while the pandemic may seem like a recent crisis, it is not the only one. From the spread of antibiotic-resistant diseases to the potential for new viruses, pestilence, like the Black Horse, remains a constant threat in our world. The Bible warned that these outbreaks would plague humanity in the last days. Alongside pestilence comes famine. The world is already facing growing food insecurity due to climate change, supply chain disruptions, and economic instability. Regions that once thrived on agriculture are now facing droughts, flooding, and unpredictable weather patterns that decimate crops. The rising cost of food, coupled with global inflation, points to the possibility of famine becoming a reality for millions of people. In many ways, the third horseman, who brings famine to the earth, seems to be riding in the background of our current crises. Death, Pale Horse. Finally, the pale horse symbolizes death, which follows in the wake of war, pestilence, and famine. Death in this context is not just a natural end. It is a death that is widespread and catastrophic, taking millions of lives as a result of these scourges. We've seen the death toll from conflict, disease, and hunger rise steadily in recent years. And with climate change, political unrest, and technological threats, it's clear that death, on a global scale, could become a central feature of the last days. The four horsemen are not just distant concepts. They are already at work in the world. The signs are all around us. The question is, how long until their full fury is unleashed? The purification by fire. 2 Peter 3:10. The sky burns as flames consume the earth. Cities are reduced to ash. Forests become charred remains. And the very foundations of civilization crumble under the heat of purification. This is the day when the earth will be destroyed by fire, a fiery reckoning that will cleanse the world of its sin. In 2 Peter 3:10, the Bible warns of a time when the heavens and earth will be destroyed by fire. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, Peter writes, and the heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare. This fiery destruction is often interpreted as the final judgment of the world, where all that is corrupt and evil will be consumed in the flames of purification. Today, we face multiple potential sources of such devastation. The threat of nuclear war is ever present, with tensions between world powers, especially between nuclear-armed nations, growing more intense. A single miscalculation or act of aggression could lead to a global catastrophe, one that might fulfill the prophecy of fire. But nuclear weapons are not the only danger. Climate change, too, is escalating the risk of global destruction. Extreme wildfires, droughts, and rising temperatures are already ravaging parts of the world. And scientists warn that we may be on the brink of triggering irreversible damage to the Earth's ecosystems. In this sense, the purification by fire may not just be a symbolic vision, it could be a literal one, as humanity faces the consequences of environmental neglect and unchecked technological power. The fall of modern Babylon, Revelation 18. The great city, symbolizing wealth, decadence, and moral decay, crumbles before the wrath of God. The merchants, once wealthy and proud, mourn as their empire of greed and excess collapses. Babylon, whether a literal city or a symbolic one, falls in an instant, bringing down with it the economic and moral systems that once held the world together. In Revelation 18, the Bible describes the fall of Babylon, a city that represents more than just a place. It symbolizes a system of power, wealth, and moral corruption. Babylon, in biblical terms, stands as a warning of the dangers of excessive luxury, idolatry, and the exploitation of the poor. It is a city built on the backs of others, a place that lures people into a false sense of security, with promises of prosperity and indulgence. As we look at the world today, it's hard not to see the parallels. The modern world has built its own Babylon, a global financial system that often prioritizes wealth over the welfare of people. The relentless pursuit of consumerism, the worship of money, and the moral decay that often accompanies unchecked power all point to a society that mirrors the biblical depiction of Babylon. We are seeing growing inequality, a widening gap between the rich and the poor, and a culture that increasingly tolerates immorality in the name of progress. The Bible warns that in the last days, this system will collapse. Revelation 18 speaks of the mourning of the merchants who profited from Babylon's excess, as they witness the sudden and irreversible fall of this great city. Whether this represents a literal financial collapse or a more symbolic collapse of modern cultural values, it is clear that our global system of wealth and power is fragile. Could we be on the brink of witnessing the fall of our own Babylon? The rebuilding of the Third Temple in Jerusalem. The world watches as construction cranes rise over Jerusalem, where once stood the magnificent Temple of Solomon. The Temple Mount is once again at the center of religious and political tension, and the possibility of rebuilding the Third Temple looms large. One of the most significant prophecies concerning the end times is the rebuilding of the Third Temple in Jerusalem. In biblical prophecy, the temple is considered the holiest site for the Jewish people. In Matthew 24:15, Jesus refers to the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place. a reference to an event that will occur in the temple during the final days. For centuries, the temple has been a symbol of God's presence on earth. But since its destruction in 70 AD, the Jewish people have awaited its return. In recent years, the discussion around the rebuilding of the Third Temple has gained momentum. Religious groups and politicians in Israel are increasingly focused on restoring the temple, and some believe that its construction is the key event that will usher in the return of the Messiah. The temple's rebuilding is also highly significant in the context of the Middle East's ongoing conflicts. The Temple Mount, currently home to the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, is one of the most contentious religious sites in the world. Any attempt to rebuild the temple could spark unimaginable violence, as it would threaten the sacred sites of Islam. This ongoing conflict over the Temple Mount may be a sign that the final preparations for the end times are underway. The rebuilding of the Third Temple in Jerusalem would mark the fulfillment of a critical biblical prophecy. It signals the nearness of the final days and the fulfillment of God's plan for His people. As tensions rise in the region and the world watches closely, the question remains: is the Third Temple about to rise from the ashes of history? The return of Jesus Christ, Matthew 24:30. The clouds part, and from the sky a figure appears, a man radiant with glory, descending in power and majesty. It is Jesus Christ returning to earth, as the Scriptures have foretold. The world watches in awe, and every knee bows before Him. The final prophecy we turn to is the return of Jesus Christ. In Matthew 24:30, Jesus Himself tells His disciples, "At that time the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory." The return of Christ is the ultimate fulfillment of God's promises to His people. This event will mark the culmination of the age, bringing with it the final judgment and the establishment of God's eternal kingdom. For Christians, this is not just a future hope, it is the hope that sustains us through trials and tribulation. But the signs that Jesus spoke of, the rise of false prophets, the increase in wickedness, wars, natural disasters, are all present today. As the world continues to spiral into chaos, the return of Christ becomes not just a distant future event, but a very real possibility. The return of Jesus is the ultimate hope for Christians. It is the moment when all things are made right, when justice is served, and the suffering of the world will finally end. This prophecy, more than any other, offers hope to the faithful and is the final promise of God's redemptive plan. As we look at the signs unfolding in the world today, it becomes clear that the prophecies of the Bible are not just ancient predictions, they are warnings, they are promises, and they are realities waiting to unfold. The 10 prophecies we've explored, the rise of the Antichrist, the mark of the beast, Armageddon, the destruction of Damascus, and the coming of Christ, are all pointing to a time that may be nearer than we think. The world is rapidly changing, and the Bible's predictions about the end of days are beginning to look more like a roadmap than a mere allegory. We may not know the exact day or hour, but the signs are clear. The question remains, are we ready for what's coming? The Bible warns us to be vigilant, to prepare our hearts, and to live with a sense of urgency, knowing that Christ's return could happen at any time. As we move closer to 2025, the world will undoubtedly continue to change, and the stage for these prophecies may be set. What do you think? Which prophecy do you believe is most likely to happen in the near future? If this message resonates with you, like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on more discussions like this. Together, let's stay alert, prepared, and hopeful for the days ahead.